My name's Kiera Brooks. I'm 17. I never expected to be in a courtroom before graduation, especially not as a defendant. It started with a group project at school. We had to volunteer at the courthouse for civic class credit, just basic observation stuff. But I guess someone didn't like that I asked too many questions, especially about sealed records I wasn't supposed to notice. 3 weeks later, I was accused of tampering with court files. I remember sitting at that defense table in courtroom 4B, hands shaking under the wood, looking up at Judge Martha Langford. Mid-60s. Silver hair pulled tight into a knot. Face set like concrete. She didn't even pretend to be fair. From the moment I walked in, she looked at me like I was guilty. And her voice? Cold as a snowstorm. "This court takes obstruction seriously, Miss Brooks," she said. "You seem to think you're above the law." I tried to explain. I told her I didn't do anything, that I just asked questions. But it didn't matter. The bailiff passed her a folder. She scanned it and smirked. "That will be enough. We'll proceed with sanctions immediately." That's when I realized something wasn't right. No witnesses. No trial. Just her and her word. She was trying to bury me, fast. And she didn't expect me to be ready. Because what she didn't know was this: my phone was already recording. And I was about to make one call that would change everything. I could feel everyone watching me, the judge, the clerk, even the court officer leaning near the wall. But I wasn't looking at any of them. I was staring at my phone. I'd kept it in my pocket on silent, recording from the moment I stepped into that courtroom. Judge Langford thought I was just some nervous kid. She had no clue I was building a record. But that wasn't the big move. I slipped the phone onto the table in front of me and quietly tapped the screen. I hit one contact. Just one. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Langford flipping through papers. Then, a click. A smooth, controlled voice came through the speaker, U.S. Attorney's Office. "This is Deputy Counsel Mitchell." Judge Langford's eyes shot up. "What is that?" I leaned into the mic. "Hi, Uncle Darren. I'm in courtroom 4B. Judge Langford is attempting to bypass due process." Again. Gasps. Even the court officer shifted. Langford stood. "You will turn that device off," the voice on the line stayed calm. "This is being recorded and monitored. Do not touch that phone." "Judge Langford, I'm sending federal agents to the courthouse right now. Do not proceed with any ruling." You could have heard a pin drop. Langford's face drained of color. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. I stayed still. I didn't blink. Because that's the thing she didn't count on. She thought I was alone. She didn't know my family had power, quiet power. Legal power. And we knew how to use it. Judge Langford lowered herself slowly back into her chair like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. The courtroom wasn't loud, but the silence felt heavy. Almost dangerous. Her eyes darted toward the bailiff, who was now frozen by the bench, clearly unsure whether to follow her usual orders or stay the hell out of it. The court reporter had stopped typing. Everyone could feel the shift. The authority in the room no longer belonged to her. I spoke again, my voice calm but steady. "This isn't the first time you've done this, is it, Judge Langford?" Her jaw clenched. "You've pushed cases through without witnesses. Threatened minors with detention for questioning your rulings. You sealed records that should have been transparent to the public. You're out of line, Miss Brooks," she snapped. But the bite was gone from her tone. Now it just sounded tired. Cornered. The phone on the table buzzed. I turned the screen so she could see it. A video call. Live feed from the DOJ. My uncle's face appeared. He was sitting in a glass-walled conference room, surrounded by two serious-looking agents and a clerk typing notes behind him. Judge Langford, we've received formal complaints matching the situation described here, he said smoothly. You are being placed under immediate internal review. Please do not attempt to adjourn, relocate, or alter any court records. A federal team is en route. Langford swallowed. I suggest, he continued, that you let Kiera leave your courtroom. Now. The judge sat there, hands trembling slightly against her gavel. I could tell, for the first time in probably years, she didn't know what to do. But I did. I stood, slid my phone into my pocket, and looked her straight in the eye. We'll see how this court handles truth when you're not the one in charge. And then I walked out, without waiting for permission. As I stepped into the hallway, the cold marble floor felt like a runway beneath my sneakers. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. I knew what had just happened, and so did everyone behind that courtroom door. The moment it closed, I could hear the storm starting, voices raised, chairs scraping, Langford's sharp tone cracking under pressure. But it was too late. A court officer followed me out a few seconds later, not to stop me, but to offer something unexpected. Miss Brooks, he said quietly. I've seen things. If the feds ask, I'll talk. I nodded. They'll be asking. By the time I made it outside, a black SUV with tinted windows was already pulling up. 2 agents in crisp suits stepped out, ID badges ready. Kiera Brooks, the taller one asked. Deputy Counsel Mitchell sent us. I motioned toward the courthouse entrance. She's still inside. Probably trying to erase evidence. The agent gave a slight smirk. We have everything we need. Your recording helped, but this has been building for months. Your case just lit the fuse. My heart pounded. Relief mixed with adrenaline, still humming in my chest. They went in. And I sat down on the courthouse steps, staring up at the clouds. I thought about all the kids who sat in that courtroom before me, the ones without uncles in D.C., without phones that could live-stream justice. Judge Langford had made a habit out of silencing people. But today, for once, the silence was hers. And the truth? That was finally louder than the gavel. By the time the evening news rolled around, the story had already exploded online. Clips from my phone, edited and verified by the Department of Justice, were all over social media. Hashtags with my name trended nationwide. News anchors used words like systemic misconduct, abuse of power, and the student's courage. But I didn't care about going viral. What mattered was the internal audit. Within 48 hours, Judge Langford was suspended from the bench. Investigators uncovered over a dozen cases she'd pushed through without due process, mostly young defendants. Mostly kids like me. She'd made assumptions about who mattered and who didn't. Turns out, she was wrong on both counts. I got a call the next week from the Office of Legal Policy. They wanted me to speak, on record, about my experience. Not just for my own case, but as a voice for others who'd been quietly crushed by people like Langford. And I did. Nervous at first. But then I looked out into that hearing room full of suits and badges and remembered how I felt in courtroom 4B. Small. Powerless. I wasn't anymore. I'm not here because I'm special, I told them. I'm here because I got lucky, and because I knew who to call. But justice shouldn't depend on luck. It should depend on truth. When I finished, half the room stood in applause. 18 months later, Judge Langford was permanently disbarred. Her name became a warning, a lesson taught in legal ethics courses across the country. And me? I graduated early. Got an internship at the DOJ. Pre-law scholarship next fall. I still think about that courtroom sometimes, the weight of it, the chill in the air, the way a single call cracked open something rotten and let the light in. They tried to silence me. Instead, I spoke loud enough for others to be heard too. 3 years later. The air inside courtroom 6A felt different from the one I'd been dragged into as a teenager. This time, I wasn't here as a defendant, I was here as a guest speaker. A new community law initiative had launched in the city, aimed at educating high school students about their rights, the justice system, and the traps too many young people fall into when no one's watching. They called the program, Court, Citizens Offering Understanding of Rights Truth. And they invited me, Kiera Brooks, to help lead the first session. As I stood at the front of the room, looking out at 30 nervous teens in plastic chairs, I felt a familiar tension. Some of them wore hoodies just like I did that day. Some looked like they were waiting for someone to accuse them of something they didn't do. I smiled. I know what it's like to walk into a courtroom and feel like the decision's already been made about you, I said, voice steady. But that day doesn't have to define your whole story. A few heads lifted. I walked over to the judge's bench, empty for today, and leaned on it lightly. This bench used to scare me, I told them. Now, it motivates me. Because I learned something most people never get the chance to see up close: power doesn't always wear a robe. A hand went up in the back. A young girl asked, "Do you still want to be a lawyer?" I nodded. I don't just want it, I will be one. And I want all of you to know you don't need connections in DC to be heard. What you need is courage, facts, and sometimes, a phone that's already recording. Laughter. Real, warm laughter. When the session ended, a boy came up to me and said, "I always thought court was for people who messed up. But now it feels like a place where people stand up." I'll never forget that. Later that evening, I passed by courtroom 4B. The old plaque still hung by the door, though the name on it was long gone. Judge Langford's seat had been replaced, and so had the system, bit by bit. Justice is slow. But when it moves like an avalanche. And I'm not done pushing. It was nearly midnight when I got the call. Not from my uncle, but from someone I hadn't heard from in years, Officer Raynell Torres, one of the silent guards who'd stood in Judge Langford's courtroom the day she tried to bury me. "Kiera," he said, voice low and urgent, "I don't know who else to trust. But you need to see something." I paused. "What kind of something?" He hesitated. "There's a file. Not digital. Physical. Locked in the old records vault downtown. They call it the Whisper File." He told me it contains sealed testimonies, juveniles, whistleblowers, even some lower-level court clerks, all of them silenced or pressured under Langford's oversight. Some were never even entered into the official docket. No legal trail. No justice. Just names, and red tape. They were kids, Kiera. Some of them ended up in state programs. Others disappeared off the radar completely. I felt my heart drop. "And you have proof?" "I have access." He gave me an address. Midnight. Discreet. I showed up in a hoodie, phone in my jacket, pepper spray on my hip. Torres was already waiting by the gate to the old courthouse annex, the one they stopped using after the renovation, but never fully shut down. He looked older, tired. But serious. Inside, we wound our way past old file cabinets and dusty lockers until we reached a room with one rusted metal door and a broken badge scanner. Torres pulled out a key, real, metal, and unlocked it. What I saw inside made my blood go cold. Boxes. Dozens of them. Some marked only with initials. Others with case numbers I recognized. Then I saw it, a folder with my name. "What is this?" I whispered, opening it. A printed report, my school files, yes, but also surveillance notes. Photos. An internal memo titled, "Subject shows signs of institutional disruption. Recommend strategic containment." I looked at Torres. They were watching me, before the courtroom. He nodded. Langford wasn't working alone. And just like that, I realized something terrifying: my courtroom victory. It had only scratched the surface. I stood frozen with the folder in my hands, my breath shallow. My file wasn't just a record, it was a blueprint. Highlighted passages detailed my volunteer hours, social media posts, even the questions I'd asked during my school's courthouse tour. They'd flagged me before I even set foot in courtroom 4B. This wasn't about one corrupt judge, I muttered. It was a pipeline. Torres gave a grim nod. Langford was just the front. There's a task force, unofficial, but powerful. Retired judges, private correctional consultants, even a couple education board names. They target kids likely to disrupt the system, and neutralize them early. How? He opened another folder. Inside were photocopied documents stamped, confidential, juvenile corrective pathways. They described redirecting students flagged as non-compliant into alternative discipline programs. Most were run by third-party companies, and most never saw the light of public audit. They use school referrals. Fake behavioral flags. From there, it's easy to justify removing someone from mainstream education. And once you're out of the system, I said, heart racing, no one asks where you went. Torres looked me dead in the eye. You exposed Langford. But this? This goes beyond her. They've been protecting each other. Sealing files. Shuffling kids like paper between offices. A creak echoed in the hallway outside. We both froze. Torres shut off the light and motioned for silence. A shadow moved past the glass slit in the door. Then a soft click, someone testing the handle. I slipped the folder into my backpack, heart pounding. Whoever was outside didn't knock. Didn't speak. They just waited. Then, footsteps. Slowly retreating down the hallway. Torres exhaled. You need to go, he whispered. If they know you've seen this, I'm not running, I said. Not this time. But I knew what had to come next. Not a courtroom. Not a speech. A war. One that would happen quietly, but not in the dark. By morning, I was already in motion. I didn't call my uncle this time. Not yet. This was bigger than federal channels, this needed people who understood how things disappear in plain sight. I needed a network. Quiet. Fast. Untraceable. So I went to someone I hadn't spoken to since high school, Jules Chen, a coding prodigy who once hacked our school's attendance system just to correct racial bias in tardy policies. She was underground now, doing freelance cybersecurity work for nonprofits. I tracked her through an encrypted forum and sent one message, Jules. It's Kiera. I've got a whisper file. Need eyes. Need safety. She responded in 2 minutes. That night, we met in a low-lit coffee shop downtown. No names. No devices on the table. Jules scrolled through digital scans I'd made of the physical documents. Her eyes narrowed. This is deliberate. They're using outdated routing servers, burying case data in misfiled public records, and blocking citizen searches with metadata firewalls. It's all legal. Just, not ethical. How deep does it go? She tapped the screen. If we trace these education board signatures, we're not just looking at bad judges. We're looking at private prison investors who profit every time a kid ends up in one of their corrective academies. My stomach turned. Can we prove it? We will, she said, already copying files to an offline drive. But Kiera, if we do this, you're going after people who never set foot in a courtroom. People who think they're untouchable. I looked her in the eye. I don't care where they hide. This isn't about revenge. It's about every kid who disappeared and never got a second chance. Over the next 48 hours, we built a case file so airtight it could choke a defense team. Jules set up ghost sites and mirror drives. I began contacting families of other flagged students, ones with closed cases and no answers. One mom cried when I told her we'd found her son's sealed file. I thought I was crazy, she whispered. They told me he attacked a teacher. But he was in speech therapy that day. They just shipped him off. The more we uncovered, the clearer the pattern became, a quiet system designed not just to punish, but to erase. Then came the final move. I uploaded the full Whisper file archive to 3 separate law clinics, 1 whistleblower newsroom, and a civil rights legal collective. Each file carried a digital watermark. If you're reading this, you're part of the solution. Don't stop. We set a date for release, 1 week later. Simultaneously. Across all platforms. But just 2 nights before the drop, I came home to find my apartment door open. Lights off. Silence. And a manila envelope on my kitchen table with 1 sentence scrawled in red ink: "You've been warned once. There won't be a second time." I stood in the doorway, staring at the envelope. The air in my apartment felt wrong, like it had been stirred and left to settle. Whoever had been here hadn't taken anything. They hadn't needed to. Their message wasn't about what they could do. It was about what they would. I didn't touch the envelope. I didn't need to. I already knew what it meant. I called Jules. She picked up on the first ring. "They were inside," I said quietly. "My place." Pause. "Then, we're still going live." The next 48 hours were a blur. We rotated locations. Burned new drives. Backed up every file in offline vaults and peer-to-peer clouds. Then, at exactly 9 a.m. on Monday, we pushed the button. The Whisper file dropped. Within minutes, it was everywhere, a digital explosion of sealed testimony, corrupted case logs, educational misconduct, and internal memos that showed how kids were strategically redirected, silenced, and exploited. News outlets scrambled to verify. Legal teams issued statements. One of the most powerful education board chairs resigned within hours. A correctional company's stock plunged 46% before the market closed. But the biggest moment? A live-streamed congressional hearing. My uncle, now U.S. Attorney General, stood before the nation and confirmed the truth. The Whisper file is real. A multi-agency investigation is underway. Justice is not optional, and silence will no longer protect the powerful. A month later, I received a package. Inside, a court summons. Not as a defendant. As a plaintiff in a class action suit representing dozens of families affected by judicial suppression. The cover letter called it a landmark case in modern civil accountability. They tried to scare me off. Tried to warn me. Tried to erase me. But what they didn't understand is that truth doesn't die in the dark. It waits. And when it finally speaks, it echoes louder than fear. I'm Kiera Brooks. And this time, I'm not just fighting back. I'm rewriting the rules.